Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order, starting with a determination of the quorum. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Chair, we have 6 present.
Thank you very much. We'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first item on the agenda is our truth and taxation hearing. The rules of that particular part of the agenda is that it cannot take place until 6 o'clock by law. So we're going to proceed with the agenda until 6 o'clock hits, and then we'll come back to that item. And so that brings us first to an approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
But a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any further comment? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all. Next will be community comment. Do we have any members of the community who would like to comment to the school board tonight? You guys are doing a presentation, I'm assuming. Okay. So we'll come over there in a second. Any other? Then I recognize everybody else in the room, so we'll give it a moment in case. But seeing none, we'll move along with the agenda. That brings us to recognition awards and presentations, and we'll start with the Faribault Middle School Falcons for Change.
Board, we'd like to thank you for giving us this time. Just some brief introductions before we give our presentation. I'm Brent Hawkins, middle school counselor and one of the Falcons for Change advisors.
I'm April Koppitz, one of the other school counselors and the other advisor for Falcons for Change.
I'm Darby LeCan, Team 701. I joined Falcons for Change because I like to help our community and clean our community.
I'm Amina Oyo. I'm Team 802 and I joined Falcons for Change because I like giving back and I like to go on fun trips.
Hi, I'm Zahra Abdullahi. I'm from 801. I joined Falcons for Change because I want to get involved with the community.
I'm Morgan Borchert. I'm on Team 801, and I joined Falcons for Change because I like to make people smile and I like being involved.
And just a quick reminder before you guys get too far, make sure you talk nice and loud to those mics.
So Falcons for Change started 5 years ago, kind of because we had so many kids that wanted to do service projects and do different things in the community. We had student council and they did stuff, but we couldn't keep up with the amount of ideas that the kids had and the amount of help they wanted to provide. So we created this group, which grew from 40 to 80 to 100 to now roughly 197 students who give volunteer hours. I think we've cleared the 1,000-hour mark already before the winter break, which is pretty much on pace of what we've done the last few years. Our goal is to provide community service to those who need it in the school, community, and throughout the world. We have a few ideas that we generate ourselves, and we'll go through each of those ideas. Ms. Koppas and I each are in charge of a couple of them that we have different kids join if they're interested in, and the majority of the other ones are all student ideas and student-driven. And the main way we can go about a lot of this is through the integration dollars and Heidi Onis helping us and supporting us in that adventure. So we'll kind of go through each of our areas, and the kids can talk about what they like or if they've been on it. One of the field trips, but these are just 4 of 197 amazing kids who pick and choose the things that they want to do and what they're passionate about.
So twice a month, every other Friday, I take a group of students over to McKinley Early Childhood Center, And all 4 of these students have been to McKinley throughout their middle school career. And so I'm going to let them talk a little bit about their experience there and what they like about going to McKinley.
We've helped the preschoolers. We've helped the preschoolers learn their alphabet by singing fun songs with them.
We go in morning meeting with them, and we help them learn numbers and letters and how to draw. And I like going because I like to see how much they smile when we come.
I like to go to McKinley because they look up to us.
That's okay. And then our second one is Pleasant Manor Nursing Home. We've got a pretty good relationship with Pleasant Manor going for the last numerous years. We had a former student of ours at the middle school, now at the high school, whose grandma used to run the activity center, so we started going there, doing things at Christmas time with them, and now we go monthly to Pleasant Manor Nursing Home. Last year, we adopted the residents there instead of each resident for the holiday season. We just asked to redo their activity center, and we purchased gifts and brought them and played with the residents, and we'll do that again this year coming up next week. But we go monthly, and each time's a different theme, whether it's between bingo or painting pumpkins for Halloween or different things. We bring a group once a month of about 20 students with us for that trip, and I know that a lot of you have been there, so if you'd like to speak about your experiences with that, feel free.
I like to make friends with the residents and play fun games with them.
I like going because we play bingo, and I like to see how excited they get when they win.
When Jessica Lewis was at the Faribault Education Center, we decided to take monthly trips there, which was really eye-opening to some of our students. And I think probably the most rewarding experience of all of the trips that we do within the community. So we take a group of 20 students to the Faribault Education Center every month and visit the classrooms, the newcomer classroom and the level 1 ESL classroom with the adults, and they cannot take enough help. I mean, they said that they would love to have us come every week if we could, but that's just not feasible. But we take a different group of kids to this project in the classroom, and we spend an hour and a half over there. So we've been doing this now for at least 3 years, I want to say, and so it's working with Cassie now is wonderful, and hopefully this thing just continues. Some of you, I know that, girls, you feel very strongly about this trip.
It's fun to see older people wanting to learn.
We do math with them, and we do like reading.
I like to go to Faribault Education Center because I know most of them, and it's cool helping them out.
I've been there once, and I worked with this really funny girl. She was counting by 4s, and every time she'd mess up, she'd just smile and laugh. So that was just really fun for me.
I don't know how many years we've gone now. 4. So last 4 years, we've had students raise money for Special Olympics Minnesota. And so last year, students had to raise $50, and if they raised that $50, they could go over to, I think it was Minneapolis, and we jumped into a frozen lake. And so it's a full day of fun activities, and at the end of the day, we get to jump into the frozen lake. Did you all 4 go? A few of you guys went. Brent and I jumped as well. So it's an awesome opportunity. And then an awesome thing about that is that some of the proceeds go back into our adapted Phi Ed classes. And so that's awesome for those students as well. But I know a couple of them have gone, so I'll let them share about their experience with that.
Last year I jumped into the frozen lake, and it was a fun experience while doing it.
We jumped into the frozen lake to raise money for Special Olympics, and last year I ended up losing my glasses.
Oh, no.
I went because it's for a really good reason, and it's really fun. Special Olympics helps awareness to special people in need.
In our time at the Special Olympics, the Polar Plunge, I think it was 50% of the funds that we raised. So I know some of the stuff for our adaptive Phi Ed classes that we have been able to purchase through the last few years would have never been possible without this. And Faribault Middle School has been a unified school for the last few years. We've done some training in Farmington with the kids for inclusion. We've helped out down in those adaptified classrooms with some of the kids. So being a unified school is pretty important to our adaptified teachers and our special ed teachers. And so it was a great way. It was kind of a win-win, a fun experience, but yet for a great cause. Plus it benefited our own students in the middle school.
So through community school, I hold a Falcons for Change club on Monday evenings. And so in that club, what we've worked on so far this year, we've made blankets for the Children's Hospital here in, the District 1 Birth Center here in Faribault. And then we took pillows and purchased those items to make them, and then we deliver them to Ruth's house, which we'll be showing you in the next slide. And in the first picture you see right there, students made thank you cards to our veterans, and we stuck those into the military care packages that we'll be sending out here soon.
So the first slides that we showed you were the ones that we kind of coordinate. I'll do the Faribault Education Center, she'll do McKinley, we'll do the Polar Plunge together, and that's open to all students who want to sign up for those areas, keep their grades up, they can go on those trips, and we try to rotate as many kids through as possible throughout the year so each kid can go at least a few times. And so that's kind of our ideas, and if that's all it was, which is kind of what it used to be, was the things that we did in Falcons for Change. Picked a few things and went with it. It's kind of expanded now through the years to student-generated ideas. So the first one was during Unity Day. It was, we're going to raise money for Unity Day. What do you want to do? And the kids jumped on the phone and started calling places and asking what people needed. And the first thing was Ruth's house. There was a conversation at Ruth's house in that, of course, they could use supplies just to keep their programs running and the money that it costs daily. So the kids went out and they got some supplies, and you can see the pictures up there. We delivered pillows and cleaning supplies to Ruth's house this year. So that was something that they chose to do through Unity Day.
And then I had a group of 8th grade female students approach me, and they wanted to do something for the Cancer Center here in town. And so 2 of the girls are here today, and so they put together care packages. I'm going to let them talk to you about why they chose the Cancer Center and what they put into those packages.
We had baskets for the cancer patients, and we took time during our Falcon time to make them, and we put motivational quotes so they can be like inspired. And we had bandanas for their hair. We had crossword puzzles to keep them busy. We gave them candy so they can enjoy, and we had chapstick.
I really wanted to add motivational quotes to the baskets because I wanted them to look at it as a positive reminder for the hard days.
So we took a trip out there, and those girls got to deliver them to the Cancer Center, and it was an awesome opportunity to see them, how happy they were with those.
Morgan?
We wanted to give back to the Hope Center, so we connected it with Unity Day, which is a bullying day that we celebrate, we, I don't know the word.
Promote inclusion and acceptance.
Yeah. So we called oh my gosh, I can't talk. We called the Hope Center, and we asked them what we could do to help, and they really needed gas cards, so we, during the lunches, we sold popsicles, and we raised 4 $25 gift cards for them, just so we could and we donated them, and we brought them there with just a few people, but we just really wanted to help with something.
Morgan's the one that spearheaded that, had some friends, and contacted the Hope Center herself on that. With our Veterans Day program, Mr. Armbruster had a slide up in the middle school, and we elected to go in the social studies classrooms and place boxes to donate military packages. Those are now done. We have a list with addresses of some of our former Faribault Middle School students who are serving currently, some deployed, some just in basic training or elsewhere, and so they're getting care packages sent to them from us. And then we also, through our Student Council Santa and Smiles program, we've adopted families at the holidays like we always have, but then we added 3 military families this year who we're working through with Tracy McBroom and Veteran Affairs are struggling this holiday season, so we're going to take care of those families as much as we can at the holiday season on top of some of our own families. So some of the leftover stuff that we have from the packages that we're gonna get sent out are gonna go to them. And then we're gonna partner with the Faribault Elks Lodge for the remainder of that stuff to give to the VA hospital and to various places. So this is, again, the students collect it all, they organize it all, they coordinate it all. And so this is something that we usually try to do around Veterans Day and take through with the month of November. So these are nothing new. These are just kind of some highlights of some of the things that we've done.
These are just some upcoming events we have planned. We hope to get to them before the end of the school year. Rescue 55021, we have a group of students who are, so they put together some dog toys and things like that, and they're going to go deliver them to the rescue center. We have children's blankets we're going to deliver to Gillette Children's Hospital, so like some baby blankets they worked on. Ronald McDonald House, we plan to go there. Also Feed My Starving Children. Like I said, District 1 Children's or Birth Center, we took some blankets over there. The Faribault Food Shelf, we like to collect donations and deliver food to that place. Muddy Pods, it's very similar to Rescue 55021. Students like to work on service projects and make like animal toys or blankets to deliver to them. We plan to go to the Polar Plunge in March, and then if students come up with any other ideas, we plan to get to those as well. So like he said at the beginning, we could not do this without Heidi Onis. She supports our program, which is awesome for all these kids. So thank you so much. Do you guys have any questions for us or for any of the students?
We have 197 kids in this program that pick and choose the things they want to do. If a nursing home isn't their best experience, then they might not want to go there, but they want to go to McKinley. If they have a family in the military, they jump on board and want to really help with that one. If they've been helped by the food shelf, they seem to want to really help with that. And so we have 197 kids that pick and choose the things they want to do, but in general, we just have so many great quality kids at the middle school that we thought it was time that they recognize some of the great things that they do. I mean, I've been here for 18 years, and the kids they just amaze you every day. So we just wanted to highlight a lot of the great things that they do, and thank you guys for listening. And if you guys have any questions, I'm sure they can answer them. They were pretty nervous today, but they did a good job.
I'm really impressed with you students taking the lead on contacting the community organizations. It's really great that you're stepping forward and doing a lot of the background work. And I especially appreciate all the various community organizations that you're partnering with. It really does make a difference in our community. Thanks.
I also think it's really fabulous that you're starting this work at such a young age, because you probably have a lifetime ahead of you of doing this kind of work, which will benefit any community that you're a part of. And so thank you for modeling that and being the leaders for the kids to learn that kind of stuff. So 197 kids, that's a lot.
Over 25% of our students.
That's what I was wondering.
Wow.
To the two leaders, thank you. Appreciate all your time and efforts, and I don't know if it continues to grow, if 197 is the most you've had so far or not, but thank you to you kids. Great job, as Courtney said. This is likely shaping your future, and you will find out in life there's few things more rewarding than volunteerism and making a difference in less fortunate people's lives. And so you guys are doing that, and with the help of your leadership. So thank you. And please tell your classmates who aren't here, the other 193, I don't know why they're not here tonight. But no, please tell them that the board says thank you as well. And Misty, Misty's the lady in the green in back. She writes newspaper articles for the Faribault Daily News. If you need an article to write, these kids could probably fill 3 or 4 pages. I mean, this is an incredible thing that probably doesn't get told enough when you look at all these people that they're making a difference for throughout our community. So just absolutely awesome. And you know, we talk about test scores and measurables, and these are a lot of the immeasurables that go on in our school district and our community on a daily basis, and it's absolutely awesome to see. So thank you.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just want to say I'm very inspired by your work. I'm a social worker for my job, and I just want to say everything you do means a lot to people, and they really appreciate your kindness and the donations, but probably mostly just your kindness and knowing people are there for them. So thank you very much.
And thank you for what you do, young people and advisors as well, because I think this is just another great example of one of the many programs of outreach into the Faribault Public School community, and it's very important to show that yes, we do reach out and we do have young people who are invested in this community as well. So thank you for all you do. And kids, keep it up. Very nice job.
Yeah, and I'll just finish. Thank you for the work that you've done part of this program, but also thank you for coming tonight. I know it's really intimidating to sit there in front of strangers and talk about the things that you do, but you guys did a fantastic job tonight, and so you should be really proud of yourselves. I'm sure your parents are proud of you as well. I know your teachers are proud of you. So thank you for coming and sharing your story and representing not just yourselves, but your whole school tonight for us. And you did just a fantastic job. So thank you so much for coming. So we got a few more minutes until 6, so we'll move on to a few more items. Number 6, consent agenda. Items in the consent agenda are not debatable, but any item can be removed by any board motion or any board member. Are there any requests for separate action? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
John Bellingham.
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier.
Aye.
John Curry. I'm sorry, excuse me, he's still on the list. I apologize for that. Jason Engbright.
Aye.
Yvette Marthaler.
Aye.
Carolyn Treadway.
Aye.
Chad Wolf. Aye. Mr. Chair, passes 6-0.
All right, thank you so much. We have no retirements tonight. Finance. You have in your packet the minutes from the Finance Committee this past month. Any questions on that?
Mr. Chair, I'll just add that the Finance Committee did review the attached contracts or requests for positions, and they were approved by the Finance Committee. I think I would give lots of credit to the staff that presented at the Finance Committee. As you can see, the addition of the special education staff actually will result in additional revenue for our general fund. So, and it's an outreach to kids in Head Start and hopefully builds a student body going forward. And additionally, the position at the Education Center, I believe, is due to the high use of the Education Center and all the adults that are trying to further their education there. And I appreciate the idea of adding staff to make sure we're doing the accounting and test scores and keeping track of the records accurately. So I would certainly take any questions about the Finance Committee.
Thank you very much. So this brings us to item 8B, with 3 items that were reviewed by the Finance Committee and suggested for board approval.
Hey, Mr. Chair, can we hold off on number 3, the approval of levy, until after the levy presentation, just in case there's questions, just as a formality?
Absolutely.
All right,
so
thank
we
you.
will skip item B3 for the moment and come back to it when 6 o'clock hits and we can get on to the presentation. So we'll start with item number 1, the Special Education Paraprofessional Edition. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. This brings us to item 8B2, FECOP2 Secretary Edition. Any questions or comments on this item? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. This then will skip item 8B3 and come back to that. So that brings us to item 8C for the budget. We have a number of reports, or a couple of reports on enrollment and finances. Mr. Superintendent, would you like to make any comments on those, or Andrew?
Yeah, pretty simple. We're down 2 students from where we were the last time with our total enrollment. So relatively stable for the first couple months, which is good. And then the financial reports were all in line with what we expected for expenditures and revenues for now. And then there's also an investment report, that we also took a look at too, to review the different investments that we have with our local community and with our OPEB funds, and then also our MESLAF fund.
Okay, excellent. Are there any other questions or comments on either of the reports, the enrollment or financial report?
I am curious, with the food budget, where we came out with students actually enrolling in that.
As far as the compensatory revenue? Yeah, is that what you're talking about with the free and reduced lunch applications? We actually have our leadership meeting tomorrow. So Brenda presents to us tomorrow, so I won't have those reports. If you remind me next week, I'll bring it up and then I'll give you an update.
Okay, great. Because that would significantly impact the food service fund at some point, so.
Yeah, and actually for that revenue, we actually have to take that out of the general fund.
That's right.
Yep, so.
And I'm guessing, Mr. Sesker, when you were talking about the two students, you might have been referring to one of the buildings. Overall, there was
over all the buildings, we had a decrease of 2 total.
2 total.
Net total, yep. Some kids coming in, some kids coming out.
Any other questions or comments on these 2 reports? Hearing none, we will move on to item 8C3, gifts and donations. We have 2 donations this evening. One from Laura M. Hansen, a violin valued at $500 for the orchestra program, and Victoria Teach in the amount of $25, donation for the NEST program at the Faribault High School. I will entertain a motion for approval of these items.
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Before we vote, I'll just make a quick comment that I'm sure on behalf of the board, we're always grateful and thankful for any donations, large or small, that come into the district to help these wonderful programs that proceed. In this case, the NEST and the orchestra are 2 of our finest, so we appreciate all donations. With that, Mr. Clerk, would you please do the roll call?
John Bellingham. Aye. Courtney Cavalier.
Aye.
Jason Engbrek.
Aye.
Yvette Marthaler.
Aye.
Carolyn Treadway.
Aye.
Chad Wolf, aye. Mr. Chair, passes 6-0.
All right, thank you so much. So, it is 5:59. I'm going to suggest we wait the minute, and then Andrew, if you want to come up and get ready for your presentation, we will not start it until 6 o'clock. I'm going to use my clock. I'm pretty sure it's tied to NIST. So. Physicists were very particular about our time. So. All right, my clock says 6 o'clock, Andrew, so you may begin item number 2, the truth and taxation hearing, whenever you're ready for it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have our annual truth and taxation hearing, 2019 Pay 2020 levy. All right, so some ground rules for tonight's hearing. We are required by law to discuss the district budget and to also discuss the 2019 Pay 2020 property tax levy. And in conjunction with that, I'm also going to give you guys a brief overview of the fiscal year 19 actual revenues, expenditures, and fund balances. Okay? All right, with that, here we go. The 2019-2020 general fund revenue budget. Now, all of these numbers are the adopted numbers from the business meeting in June 24th of 2019. Tonight's adopted budget is still preliminary, so please remember that these numbers will be revised at least one or two more times throughout the course of the year for final approval in June, and that's pretty regular for our history here at Faribault Schools. Total revenues encompassed in this year's preliminary budget are $53.7 million. Just a couple items of note. As you can see, state sources make up over 80% of our annual budget. Here's a slide that we enjoy sharing with boards and communities in Minnesota, just to kind of give people some context for where we are at from a funding standpoint. As you can see by this graph, 2003 was the last year at which we were fully funded from a state budget standpoint. So since 2003, state general education revenue formula has not kept pace with inflation. So what does that mean for us? That means for fiscal year 19-20, the legislature approved an increase of 2%, or $126 per year. So we'll be getting $64.38 per pupil this year. And then next year we'll be getting $65.67 per pupil. Now that's a 2% increase each year, which obviously, as you can see, is the first time that's happened in a couple of years for us. But that still means that we are lagging $639 per pupil since 2003, or $567 million annually across the state of Minnesota. So schools are doing the best that they can with the resources available in this current climate to keep up with the mandates of the state and to be innovative at the same time. Oh, I see that the slide got a little messy in translation over here, so I apologize about that. Here we have our 2019-2020 expenditure budget, which for the general fund totals approximately $54.4 million. Wages and benefits make up $41.7 million, or 77% of that budget. One caveat I'd like to make is that, here at Faribault Schools, we do contract out our transportation and our food service. So one thing you do want to consider is that if we were a school that did not do that, our wages and benefits would be much closer to that state average of 80%. So that is one thing I do like to point out here, that we just have a little unique thing going on. So that is captured currently as a part of the purchase services, which shows up as 14% of our annual budget. All right, our fund balance. So we got our audit draft late Friday evening, so I apologize, this slide was submitted on Thursday, so it has not been updated for that. But I can tell you that the FY19 actual percentage is correct. Now, if you guys are anything like me, percentages are great, but what does that mean in terms of dollars? What are we sitting on? So we had total revenues for last year of $52.8 million. We had total expenditures of $56.7 million. So that resulted in a planned decrease in fund balance of $3.9 million. And we had budgeted to deficit spend about $4.8 million. So that was intentional deficit spending.
Andrew, can I just, one comment there? Yep. Of that deficit spending, some of that was a transfer of OPEB fund.
Correct.
Yep. I just want people
$2.5 million of that was.
I just want people to understand that that was essentially a transfer, or I'm not sure how you want to word it, but it was not
correct
additional spent on labor.
Right, right. And I have a slide that talks about that later on as well. Yep. But yes, so for the record, yes, we did deficit, or we had intended that as part of the creation of the irrevocable OPEB trust fund. So our fund balance policy, as you can see on the slide, says that we should have no less than 9.5% of our unassigned general fund balance. So what does that mean in terms of dollars to you guys? Well, that means 1 month and 4 days of operating expenditures, a little over $4 million, okay?
At the 9.5.
At 9.5%, that's what our fund balance policy says. FY19 actual unassigned fund balance came out a little higher than that, as we can see, at 11.5%. What does that mean in dollars? That means 1 month and 13 days worth of cash to operate the district. Okay, so we're above that minimum fund balance. And for fiscal year 20, our preliminary budget of 10.66% equates to 1 month and 8 days of operating expenditures. Just some interesting facts for you to quantify that out a little bit.
And what, sorry.
No, go ahead.
What's the deficit spending with that number for the
That number?
preliminary budget?
For 20, we had projected to deficit spend 583,000. So resulting in about 5.7 million in unassigned fund balance. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So now we've covered the general fund. We're going to move on and cover a little bit of FY 19-20 budget for the remaining funds of the district. So you can see food service. We have a projected deficit spend of $112,000 for this coming fiscal year. And that is, again, as the result of the food service audit, where we had to move funds back into the general fund, so we got an inflated food service fund balance, and the state requires us to have a threshold that we can't go over. Community service fund continues to grow as our community education team secures more federal and local grants. So you can see that we have a net positive to community service of $57,000 projected for this fiscal year. And then the debt service fund, we have a deficit spend of $55,000 planned, which is very normal for the debt service fund. And this just operates to cover our bond payments on our refunding bonds that we have outstanding. So one big item of note that I've taken a little bit of pride in since I've come over to Faribault is when you look at overall operating debt that a school district has, here in Faribault at the end of the year, we ended last year with about $14.3 million in outstanding debt. Related to bonds, we have about a total of $17 million after you factor other debt. When you look across the state of Minnesota for like-sized schools, you look across our conference, the next closest school to us has $36 million in outstanding bonds. So something to take pride in here in Faribault is that we've been really good stewards of our money, and we've done the best with what we have to innovate to do the best we can for our students here in Faribault Public Schools. So it's just something I really wanted to bring to your attention, something to think about.
Could I just chime in real quick too? Thanks for that. It does talk about the responsibility the board's had with regarding debt and paying off our debts. The unassigned balance, you asked a question about the current budget. So Andrew gave you the total of 583,862. That's with the reserve fund. That's with LTF admin. Our unassigned fund balance will go down 384,000.
Yep. My apologies. I looked at the fund in total. That's right. Okay. All right. Moving on, this year we happen to have a capital projects fund or a building and construction fund. That is for the parking lot projects taking place at the elementary schools, where we're trying to just improve in parking lot safety and the safety for our bus drop-offs and pickups. And then we also have the irrevocable trust fund, as Board Member Wolf referred to, that we are that $2.5 million went into for the OPEB fund to be established.
And just historically, that was a decision made because we felt it had a better return long-term for that fund, I guess, if that was them trying to, it probably was done not this year, the year before, so that's why that was, the board made that decision.
Correct. Thank you, Yvette. All right, so we've covered our adopted budget from FY20. So we're going to look briefly in the next couple slides here at the levy. So there's some background here. So each school district may levy taxes in over 40 different categories. Levy limits are the maximum levy amounts for each category, and these are set by state law or voter approved. So the Minnesota Department of Education calculates detailed levy limits for each district in this 40-page calculation, and I have included the 40-page calculation and a one-page summary, something like this, in your guys' board packets for you. So that helps you visualize 40 pages on one page and make a little more sense of it. Yep. The school board adopts the proposed levy in September, if you all recall doing that, where you certified the maximum levy. And then after tonight's public hearing, the board will approve a final levy as calculated by MDE in that same 40-page document, according to the formulas approved by the state legislature, plus any voter-approved amounts. So we are going to cover 3 funds tonight that are funded by the levy: the general fund, community service fund, and the debt service fund. So in the general fund, there are 2 separate calculations, so I'll talk about them each in turn. The first one is based, our levies distributed on the referendum market value, and you'll find that the referendum market value of properties in our county, in Rice County, increased by 8.5% this year. So these amounts will be levied now the fall of 2019, and they will be accounted for as revenue in our coming school year, which will be fiscal year 2021. So if you look at the slide there, local optional revenue, which is essentially allowed by the board, the school board, and then state approval, we're allowed to levy $724 per pupil, which we do. And then we also have voter-approved operating levy of $2.4 million, which is inclusive of the passage of the $221 per pupil for question 1 that passed back in November. So we have an overall increase of $707,000, which is a direct result of the passage of question 1, as I just mentioned, and that'll be a part of our fiscal year 21 budget. I see the slide got messed up in translation again, so I apologize. It is clean on the printout.
That looks great.
Actually makes it more interesting.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. The second part of the general fund levy is just, this part is levies distributed on the net tax capacity. And again, we saw another increase in our property values of 8.6 overall. Here, each of these formulas is driven by the net tax capacity, pupil counts, and additional calculation components as defined in Minnesota statute and as approved by the legislature. So the major change here is net decrease in taxes due to a project that was originally scheduled through our LTFM dollars for an HVAC project that the board at that time decided that they didn't, after it was levied for, decided they did not want to do that. So it is showing up this year, as you can see at the bottom, as a negative adjustment to our taxpayer of $842,000. So taxpayers on the levies distributed on the net tax capacity side will see a decrease of $813,601 as a net decrease in taxes. Our community service fund, there's no major changes to our community service levy components. It's consistent with prior years, and you'll see a total net increase of about $6,000 to that levy. And then on our debt service fund, the increase in the levy is a direct result of the issuance of our abatement bonds that we did for the parking lot projects. And again, that was done to improve safety for our bus drop-off and pickup zones at those elementary schools. And then lastly, I have here for you just a summary in total looking by fund, what the percentage changes and dollar changes. So as you can see in the general fund, we're going to see a negative 1.43% change, or a reduction of about $87,000 in levies. Community service, 7,100, or increase of 2%. Debt service, increase of about 412,000, or 22.37%. Resulting in a net decrease in taxes to the Faribault Public Schools taxpayer of 4%. And with that, I am open to any questions.
Questions for Andrew? Hearing none, I will thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Last we were together, had skipped over item 8B3, approval of the 2020 levy certification. So we'll come back to that item. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry. We got to approve first and then discussion after that?
I'll open it to discussion after a motion in a second if you have more questions you want to ask. So I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
Yeah, sorry. When Andrew was just up here, and maybe I just had a quick brain freeze here, but on slide 14 and 15, did it not show that the percent change was a -4%? It should have been positive, thank you. Because the document that we're looking at in B3 shows a positive 4%. And so I just wanted to make sure that those fours were the same fours, not one negative, one positive. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Comments on this item before we vote? We have a motion and a second. If there are no further comments, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So this brings us to item 9 on the agenda this evening, a number of committee reports. This evening, there is no report from the District Advisory Committee. There is no report from the Technology Department. There is no report from the Insurance Committee. Anne-Marie Leland is here to give us reports on the Wellness Committee and Community Ed. So Anne-Marie, if you want to take that away.
Sure, thank you. So wellness, we've been busy in our Just Step Challenge. The winner of the challenge is Lincoln. They put in a total of 773,527 steps. That was over 3 months. I'm looking to Nicole as she's my guidance person. Yep, okay, 3 months. 6 weeks, all right.
3 months.
Somewhere between 6 weeks and 3 months. So, coming in second was Roosevelt, 717,000 steps. ALC, 713. They don't have very many staff there. I think that was all
That's pretty
Shane.
impressive.
Yeah. High school, 576,000. McKinley, 529. Jefferson, 424. Middle school, 407. And the DO is somewhere there. So we did a great job as a district stepping our way to a healthy and better self. And there will be a drawing then that happens for everyone who participated in the Just Step Challenge, and prizes such as a wellness day off, perhaps a blender, nutritional blender, those kinds of things. So we always love this time of year. It's very fun. Of course, that is all purchased with the employee health funding piece. I always get that wrong, Nicole. What is it?
Wellness dollars?
Yeah, wellness dollars. There it is. Okay. So that is that. So good job, Lincoln. We're really happy. Oh, on that team was Nicole Pearson, Judy Becker, Judy Carver, Laura D. I don't know. Candace Gunderson, Tina Lloyd, Tracy McGillivary, Mark Reavers, and Joey Rue. So that's awesome. It's a lot of steps. The other piece of good news about wellness is coming in January. On the 28th, we will have biometric screening, which means that people who want to sign up to get their cholesterol checked, their glucose, body mass index, their blood pressure, etc., will have that opportunity. So on the 28th, it's the district office in the morning and the afternoon. The 29th is the high school. And the 30th will be Roosevelt Elementary. So that was a huge success a couple of years ago. We had a large participation. We get a group report coming out of that. Everybody gets their own individual report. It's like a 14 to 20 page personal wellness report about your health indicators, and then a group report comes to us as district staff so we can look through that and identify any red flags in that data. So it's really cool.
So Anne-Marie,
Yeah.
you did not mention a couple schools, so that just means that those schools will have an opportunity, but they just have to go to a different site.
They would have to go to a different site. And the times are they start at 6 a.m. So we've been, and they go until about 5 p.m. So there will be good participation again. That's biometric screening. That's about it for wellness. Any questions?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, great.
Move
Yeah,
on
it's
to
good
community
information.
ed.
Okay, so community ed, just 2 things. I hope everyone got to see the beautiful wreaths that were auctioned off today with Project ABLE, so our Adults with Disabilities program. Fantastic. Cassie Onstad came up with that idea. We had a large donation of bulbs, Christmas bulbs and other holiday kinds of materials donated, and then our adults made some wreaths with that. So I purchased, Matt Steichen and I were in a bidding war, and I believe I got my wreath that I wanted. So the other piece of good news about community ed is we received another grant, Office of Juvenile Justice Program, for the Youth Intervention Program grant, and that's a $44,000 grant. It's in partnership with Healthy Community Initiative, and it will fund the Check and Connect program at the middle school. That funding is over 2 years. So we've already identified 5 mentors, adult mentors, pairing them with 28 students. Mike Myhawk and Joel Young are also going to be mentors, but they're doing it on their own dime. So that's a nice cash match, and a wonderful opportunity for them to connect with students in a really intensive and proactive way. So we're hoping to build the 6 through 12 Check and Connect program, and doing so by getting some grant money to infuse it, and hopefully at some point being able to sustain it, but wanting to look at the data to make sure it is proving to be successful for our students. That's it.
I do have one other thing.
Yes.
You and Olivia are presenting this week.
Yes, at Rotary. So Olivia was, didn't know what to expect or what to do, and I said, well, we need to have a presentation. Within 2 hours, she sends me a 25-slide presentation of everything. It's like she had been there for 5 years, 10 years. ECFE is featured in the very beginning. We really like to talk about our early childhood family ed program. It's a terrific program that engages parents and children at the same time. And then it goes into talking about our preschool programming, of course, for our 3 and 4-year-olds, our early childhood special education, all of the other services, birth to 3, OT, physical therapy, all those good things. So she will be presenting for the most part. I will just be there to hand her the mic and wish her good luck with that presentation. So if anybody wants to join Todd and I for lunch on
Yeah, I'd love to have you.
Wednesday, and you're right there, so we could just come on over, Courtney. It'll be fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's it.
Any other questions for Anne Marie?
Yeah.
Anne Marie, can I ask you
Yes.
one question real quick? The redone wrestling room, the
Yeah,
multi-purpose room.
so cool.
Is community ed using that a lot
Yes.
during the, they are?
Every day, Monday through Thursday for community school, we use it to burn off a lot of steam for all day. Kids are in school and they're going in there for soccer programming, all sorts of just programming that they're using that for. Yeah, we're using that every day. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else?
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, we are now on item 9F, special services. There's no report this evening. 9G, facility committee, there's no report this evening. Policy committee, 9H, there's no report. We do, however, have some policies to consider this evening. If I'm reading this correctly, this is a little different format than what I'm used to with the policies, but policies 714 and 537 are first reading. Does that imply that the other policies are in their second reading?
No, it should say second reading. That is just a typo. It shouldn't say first reading. They've already had a first reading.
All of these have had
The first reading was August 26th.
This is the date of that
Yeah,
first reading.
yeah,
I'm
we just
sorry, I
hadn't put it on.
misunderstood. So
Yeah.
all of these items here are in front of us this evening as a second reading and looking for our
Yes.
approval. If there's no objection, I would entertain a motion to approve all of these policies, and then we can discuss them one by one. If there's an objection, we won't do it that way, but if there's not an objection, I'll entertain a motion to approve, and I'll read them off here. Policy 714, the fund balance policy. Policy 537, positive school expectations. Policy 510, school activities. Policy 516, student medication. Policy 611, homeschooling. Is there a motion to approve these policies?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, and then we can open up discussion on any of these policies. I'll read through them one by one just to see if there's any questions or comments as we go through them. Policy 714, any questions or comments?
I can just summarize real quickly. This just reflects that we took out the student activities and the OPEB, the post-retirement, to figure out our unassigned fund balance. So that's really the only change in the fund balance policy.
Thank you. All right, policy 537, any questions or comments on policy 537?
Again, just real briefly, we just reviewed it last summer again for the second time around. The staff went through it and we changed it to more restorative practices in the policies. So, and all the principals reviewed all their grids for the steps for any sort of positive behavior infractions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Is the board going to sign something?
Did they have to last year?
I don't remember, I was trying to recollect. Doesn't it say in the
It's in the policy,
that
but
all the partners should sign something?
yeah, I don't know. I'll have to go back and check it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
But my understanding from reading it was that all the partners assign something saying they agree to it as implemented, and school board has a role in the policy, so.
I know that all the students sign the policy and
Students do.
with that whole
Okay.
piece, but we'll check it. Ryan, got that one on your memory? We'll go look at it.
Okay. All right. Minor question, sorry.
Okay. Policy 510, school activities. Questions or comments? Okay, policy 516, student medication.
Yeah, these are all pretty standard
Questions or
changes.
comments?
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair,
Please, Mr. Bellingham.
Special Ed Director, Mr. Diard, indicated to me before the meeting that there should be a language change in policy number 516 under number 3 requirements, 3B. And it says it should read a medication authorization form. Taking out administrating prescription medications, the form should now read medication authorization. Did I?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Correct.
Thanks, Rob.
That's the new one, so thank you very much for.
Do we need an amendment to make that official?
Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Bellingham, I'll take that as an amendment to
Thank
make
you.
that change.
I
Is
would do
there a
that.
second to that amendment?
Second.
A motion and a second to amend it as described by Mr. Bellingham. Any questions or comments on the amendment? Hearing none, we'll vote on the amendment now. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I thought you were meeting with us remotely there for a second.
I know. That's what it sounds like. You noticed that, Jim.
Sorry, it was a flashback.
Get ready.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bellingham. Any further comments on policy 516? All right, hearing none, policy 611. Questions or comments? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the policies just listed with the amendment that was also just approved. Any further discussion on any of these items? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same
Aye.
sign. Motion carries. All right, thank you all. And this brings us to item 10, other matters. So item 10A, consider approval of resolution 1935, establishing combined polling places for multiple precincts and designating hours during which the polling places will remain open for voting for school district elections not held on the day of a statewide election in 2020. It's a really long title. Mr. Superintendent, would you like to say anything about this resolution in front of us?
In short, this is a new law that was passed that we have to designate polls in case we do have a special election, and which we're pretty sure that we're not going to have one for next year.
But if we might, then we have to do it.
We have to do it, yep.
Okay.
And this is something that we now put on our agenda annually, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Any questions or comments on this item? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on this item? It's a resolution, and thus I believe we should take a roll. So, Mr. Clerk, would you please take a roll call on this?
John Bellingham.
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier.
Aye.
Jason Engbrecht.
Aye.
Yvette Marthaler.
Aye.
Carolyn Treadway.
Aye.
Chad Wolf. Aye.
Mr.
Mr. Chair, passes 6-0.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Where are we? Item 10B, consider approval of hiring third party to lead school board retreat. Mr. Superintendent, do you want to remind me a little bit about what you're asking for with this item?
Yeah, so the cost of, basically the cost is $4,300. We went through that process last week. Bruce submitted the bill for it. I just want to get approval, and then also it's there for you to take a look at in case you want to bring it back the next time. It'd be about the same amount. So it's about $4,300. I think it's a good investment. Bruce did a nice job with it. And if you're considering another meeting as a board retreat, then that would be the cost for it. So right now, I'm just looking for a motion for the first board retreat so I can pay that bill.
All right.
Usually that comes before, huh?
Usually it does, but it's a little bit different with Bruce.
All right. So let's start with a motion to approve the hiring of the third part for the previous retreat. Is there a motion to approve that retreat?
So moved.
And we have a second.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on that piece of this motion to approve the expense for the retreat that we've already done?
Does this come out of school board professional development funds?
No, it really just, I mean, it's all a big general fund budget item. We'll allocate it in there, but there's really no money in the professional development for school board. It would just come out of the general fund.
Okay. I do, however, think it was well worth the $4,000.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there a need this evening to decide on a future meeting, or just keep that in mind for our benefit?
I think let's keep it in mind as we move forward with our strategic planning process now. As we look at our next couple of meetings, if we want to put that as an agenda item to talk about, we can certainly do that at any time.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Questions or comments on that item before we move on? All right, hearing none. Moving on to strategic planning. I know we have a couple of options here, Mr. Superintendent, so if you want to maybe give us a sense of what those options are, and then we can open discussion to the board on what we might want to do.
Yeah, so the first person that we can take a look at for our strategic planning to help us is Bruce Miles. You've already met him. He does a nice job with that, and that is one of his job descriptions that he does work with businesses and school districts. The other entity that you could use is MSBA, strategic planning. I'm just bringing this forward to you now. It's not a motion or anything, but just checking to see if you would like me to look at some prices for that, or if you have your mind set up on one or the other, then we can just go ahead and move forward with either Bruce or MSBA. So looking for some feedback from the board.
Sure, Todd. Just my initial impressions. I think it would be nice to have quotes from both, and while of course I'm interested in the cost, I'm also interested in sort of what it includes in terms of process in both cases. How long the process is, how many people are, just there's could be a lot involved in a strategic plan, and so getting a sense of the process as much as any of the cost would be one of the things I'd love to see a proposal from both. So that's just personally. I'd open the floor to other comments.
I echo that same sentiments. I'd like to see the price and the process.
Great.
Timeframes as well. That's would be.
Okay.
I'll agree, and as well as their availability. This is something I think we need to start sooner than later. It's likely a bit of a lengthy process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That how soon they could start would be an additional important point.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this item?
Unfortunately, this means that we won't make any decision until sometime in January for this. Or is this something you could find out and we could put on our, if you find stuff out soon enough, we could add this to our agenda for next Monday and potentially discuss something, or that's a work session?
I can check. I know that Gail from MSBA wasn't available to January 13th.
Okay.
So probably as soon as we can hear from MSBA would be January. Bruce might be able to get a little bit earlier but I can certainly check and try to go as quickly as we can.
My only thought with that is if we're not deciding this again until middle of January, you're likely out until February or March realistically until we start this process. And if there's any more information we can get sooner, the better to, get moving.
Agreed. Any other questions or comments on this item? All right, thank you all. This brings us to item 10D, the superintendent plan. So what I wanted to do tonight for this superintendent plan is give everyone a sense of how we hope to create a timeline for a decision from the board on this, and then do my best to lay out what the options are for the board in terms of deciding, and then just open it to open discussion from that point. So to start the plan, what we would like to do if possible is to have a discussion this evening, and then there seemed to be a sense that we would like to make decisions about how we want to move forward with the superintendent situation as soon as possible. And sort of towards that end, in next week's meeting, we have a special meeting. Part of that is so while normally that would be a work session and not a session in which we would take action, we would like to, if we can feel good about our discussion this evening and where we're at, see if at the next meeting 1 week from now, if we could take an action item and vote on what our plan might be at that point. We can play that somewhat by ear this evening and see how our discussion goes. But that is the plan as of this moment. In terms of the options, I think the options sort of fall into two categories. One of which is that we can make a contract offer to Superintendent Sesker and retain our current superintendent. And the other of which is we can choose to go out for a search. Both of those options have then a number of flavors, and I want to spend a little time talking about the different flavors of those. So I'll start with if we were to make a decision to make an offer to our current superintendent. Todd has expressed that he would like a 2-year contract, a standard contract for a superintendent. So the board could respond to that in a variety of ways. We could start by offering a 2-year standard contract, as has been requested. We could also offer a 1-year standard contract. Either a 1 or a 2-year contract could also be an interim contract as opposed to a standard contract. So those are the different flavors. In terms of the difference between an interim contract and a standard contract, my understanding is there's no financial aspect to the difference between those two. The difference between those two really has to do with the obligation of both parties to fulfill the entirety of the contract. In an interim contract, it is quite easy for the board to decide to move on from a superintendent with very little notice and for very little cause. Conversely, the superintendent can also, in an interim contract, give a 2-week notice and be out of the contract very quickly. So there's just less obligation on the part of both parties in an interim contract to fulfill that contract in its entirety. In a standard contract, there's a procedure in either case. Should a board choose to move on, there's a process in place by which they have to show cause and do such things, and almost always there's a payout with that. And should the superintendent choose to move on and not fulfill the contract, there's a long process involved with notification and then, for needing to fulfill a particular year of a contract, and they have to decide by a certain date, which is quite a few months in advance. And so that is the primary difference between a standard contract and an interim contract. Nicole, please correct me if I'm wrong in describing any parts of that. Anything you'd like to add about the differences between those types of contracts?
No, I think you're very accurate.
Okay, so those are my understanding of the variety of flavors that we could offer for a contract to Superintendent Sesker if we wanted to continue on in that route. The other side of that is if we wanted to go for a search, what our options are there. So searches typically can take place in a couple of ways. One of which is that we as a board could choose to run a search ourselves, which means advertising the position, seeking candidates ourselves, and doing such things. We could also hire a search firm. There are a number of them, I believe, including MSBA, who offers those services. The key item that a search firm provides is that they do a lot of legwork in order to recruit candidates. If you speak to Todd about his recruitment, there were a number of meetings over meals in order to talk to him about the district in terms of recruiting him 9 years ago. And so you're often hiring a search firm who has connections in the superintendent world to go out there and seek out those who might be interested in your position in order to build that pool. Obviously, though, there is a cost associated with that piece of it. I think those are sort of the two flavors of that. If we wanted to do our own search, one would be to run it on our own and use our own contacts to try and build that pool of candidates, and one would be to hire a firm for them to help us in order to build up those contacts. I think that was my only goal here to start, was to try and lay out as best as I could the variety of options that are in front of us. And then at this point, to try and open it to an open discussion about how we might want to proceed, any feelings on that, and hopefully towards the end of this conversation get a sense of how we might want to proceed in next week when we want to take action, what types of motions we may want to consider at that point. I'll open the floor to discussion.
I just have a question. Does anyone know an estimate of what a search firm costs?
So I checked in with 5 different search firms that are pretty common within the state of Minnesota, and they range from about $8,000 up to $30,000. It depends on how much involvement you want them to have.
And do they give a lead time as far as what they would, and I'm sorry, I've never been part of this, and maybe Jason, you can speak to this, you've been part of this, but if you engage in a search, is there a time frame that they typically give you that it's done, and or is it really just open to your parameters that you set?
So they'll put together a time frame for us based on the feedback we give them.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I have a few things kind of rattling in my brain. One is stability, not only in the superintendent position, but also with regards to the board and how that looks. I believe we will be adding a 7th board member as somebody to replace Mr. Curry, who resigned. And I believe from what I heard last week, or what the board heard last week, is we can appoint somebody. Is that accurate? If they're willing. And that person would then be on our board through 2020, but that position would be up for election in November of 2020, correct?
That's correct.
At the same token, we have 2 other seats, both your seat and Yvette's seat, that are up for election or re-election type of thing. So I want people to be thinking of that a little bit. At least I'm thinking about that from a timeline standpoint. I'm also thinking about us potentially starting and going through a strategic planning process, and then potentially not doing that with our superintendent. So in terms of that, if we move forward with Mr. Sesker, from that standpoint, I would say a 2-year contract definitely makes sense in my mind. And so I'm just thinking about those. I have absolutely zero interest in pursuing a superintendent search without a professional firm, because I know I have plenty on my plate, and I'm not going to start getting out the rotary phone and calling people to see if they're interested in coming up Faribault. So that to me is for a professional firm to do, in my opinion. That costs whatever that range type be. So anyway, just as everybody's talking about this and kicking ideas out there, I think in my mind stability is a big thing. both for our district in terms of leadership and also our board, and our strategic planning. And also with the passing of the 7-period day, I think that's a big deal for our district and for our high school and stuff. So I'll be quiet and turn it over to somebody else.
I would like to go down the road here. Obviously, I'm one that publicly back in June, that's in the vote in July that said we'll give them a 1-year contract and then do a search, November, December. Now, in analyzing the status of the district and what it's going to take to attract a quality candidate, I'm not sure we have the infrastructure we need to really present openly to a candidate to draw them in. And I'm talking about the strategic plan. I'm also talking about the superintendent evaluation of goals and objectives and those things. And I think those two pieces as a start, one that the board needs to refine and have in place before we start a superintendent search, because I think that's a huge block to start with. Once those are in place, then we can continue to take, we have a year then at least, or hopefully we'll have this. I think we talked about our strategic plan. We wanted it done by the fall. Well, that didn't happen again. So if our goal is September or August or July to have that strategic plan done so we can continue to develop, then again, maybe a year from now we can take a look. So I'm going to advocate that, one, the strategic plan is huge there. Two, the evaluation and other pieces that I can't think of right now that might fit into that so that Faribault Public Schools are known that candidates going to say the board has their act together, okay, and that here the pieces are all there, and I think good things have been done and continue to be done at all levels, but it's going to be a challenge. So I would advocate, just off the top of my head right now, I would like to continue with an interim contract, and then we could go year by year, a year, and that's what I'm comfortable with right now. I'm thinking about at this point, laying it all right out on the line. I think, having been very active in the levy campaign and things and talking to many people, I think that's what the community wants us to do this correctly. And I just want to assure the community that without these pieces in place, that we're not going to get a replacement that quality that we want and deserve here as well. So that's just my step right now.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Well, I appreciate that, John. As a board member that's coming to the end of my term here, I appreciate hearing that from you, because I would also agree. I think the strategic plan and the evaluation should be in place. So that's a year in the development. And then you'd also need, say, you start the search, I'm guessing that could take, you'd want someone in the fall of the next year. So I do think it is good to have a longer time frame. And I would support that, obviously. I think we do have good leadership at this point, and it is a time when we're in transition with enrollment and also trying to get the board, as you say, get our act together. So I would also support a 2-year contract.
And I didn't mean that as a negative to prior boards or whatever, that we haven't anything, or that we're not doing good things.
I did not take it.
No, I just want to say it's really important for me to show our community that we are doing it correctly and thoughtfully, and the process is correct, regardless of how long it takes.
John? Yeah, I'll just echo some things that were said. There's always a chicken and an egg issue, and I think all of us recognized earlier in the year that working on a strategic plan was important. The levy was there and was being worked on, which was also very important, and very difficult to do those two things at the same time. I think the passage of the levy would be a very important thing in terms of showing that we as a community can come together and supporting that way. I think that speaks very loudly in terms of a future superintendent search, that we have done that. But one of the costs of doing that this past year is that we were not moving ahead as quickly as we would have liked to with strategic planning. I don't think anybody would disagree that we would have liked to have been moving on that sooner than we have been. And thus where we're at, I just echo what a few of you have said in terms of, I think we are much better positioned if we have a solid strategic plan and have thought that through and built community partnerships and staff partnerships to do that prior to going out for a search. So I think I'm just echoing some of the things that have been said. I think I might favor a 2-year contract, standard contract, rather than interim contracts, but you know, there might be some moment at which compromise is necessary here, and I want to be supportive of us moving forward. So we'll see where we are as a board and how we want to do that. But I think that fundamental of trying to have a few pieces in place before we think about doing a search sounds to me like I'm echoing what a few others have said.
One of the things, to John Bellingham's point, is that we also don't have a superintendent evaluation system that we are pleased with. We have used one, obviously. But I'm wondering, Mr. Sesker, would it be possible for you to devise what you believe 4 or 5 goals might be for what you would like to accomplish in the next year or 2 years, so that it helps guide our decision-making in the next week? Is that too much to ask? I don't want to ask something of you that isn't appropriate.
I ask that with all of my administrators, so that's not unexpected to ask that for me. One of the things that came out of a goal session with the board was to meet with every board member every single month. And so that was a goal that we developed a number of years ago. Other goals that we have had, we've also measured in the past, but not formally as we have before. So, I mean, simply going through a process of getting goals down is, I mean, I already have the goals already set. 2 of the goals I already worked on, the levy and then now the equity piece of getting involved with my superintendent cohort. So those are already actually in process. You don't always have to write down goals in order to achieve goals. You have to keep that in mind too. You can have personal goals that you set in front of you, and you can still achieve those goals without having to write those down. But given that, if it's something that the board would like to evaluate, then that would be certainly pretty simple to come up with. Yep.
Well, for instance, in our conversations that we've had, I've been quite encouraged with your ideas for addressing some enhanced programming that hopefully would maintain and attract student enrollment, particularly at the elementary buildings. And I don't know if it's appropriate to be that specific in a goal, but it would be really helpful for me to know what you would intend to do during these next 1 or 2 years, just in being able to make that decision.
Yeah, and it has to be a collaborative piece. If it's a goal of creating a new magnet school, I can't do it without the approval of the board. We tried to do a goal a couple of years ago, as you recall, some of the board members that were here, to increase test scores. That was our goal, and the board did not accept that. So it's really difficult. I can come up with the goals, but it has to be a 2-way street where the board actually supports those goals. So before I can actually go through that process, we have to have a plan, and we have to make sure that everybody's on board with that plan as we move forward. And I can do personal goals. Personal goals are the easy ones. The harder ones are what you're talking about. Those are the higher level ones, but that has to be complete support.
Well, sounds like we all think that we should not start a superintendent search right now. So I don't think anyone has said that explicitly, but I would not like to start a superintendent search immediately. So I also would agree. I'm also interested in having Mr. Sesker stay on. I'm still thinking through the 1 year and 2 year and interim and standard contract, but I completely agree with having some goals, laying out some goals, hearing a little bit about so your vision for the future of the district for the 2 years, but also taking the onus on ourselves in terms of strategic vision. If we agree to a 2-year contract for Mr. Sesker, we should really be using those 2 years to prepare for transition and solidify some things that we have questions and are concerned about, so that we're not only ready with some of the other pieces in place that we talked about, but we're ready for a new superintendent to come in and build on what we do in the next 2 years, as opposed to using the next 2 years as we're just waiting. We're waiting for a change. I don't think I have any more comments at this time about.
Mr. Chair, I want to go back to my comments about just the calendar. If we extend Mr. Sesker for 1 year, we will be doing a search likely starting at, based off of what Bruce Miles had told us, probably in November type of thing, correct? And so then if that's the case, we fast forward to January of 2021, and we likely have, excuse me, I said that incorrectly. We potentially have up to 3 new board members that maybe lack the experience of going through these things, if you will, type of thing. We had 3 new board members this year that got absolutely thrown into the eye of the fire with 1.9 million in cuts. You couldn't ask for a worse time to have 3 new people come on and say, it's a very difficult situation. So with that, I'm not saying I won't support a 1 year, but with that, I would lean more towards a 2 year from that calendar perspective of what do those potentially new board members come into. There's definitely a learning curve. There was definitely a learning curve for me. I would guess most of you would say there was a learning curve for you when you joined the board in type of where do I get on, where do I get off, what's our role, how do I fit in on this committee, and those types of things. So the last thing I would want to do is potentially have 3 new board members in that January 2021 type of thing, feeling uncomfortable with helping select our next leader for hopefully, the foreseeable future type of thing. So I'll just, that weighs my mind more towards a 2-year contract versus a 1-year contract in my mind. So just from that calendar standpoint.
Thank you, Chad. To try and summarize what I think I'm hearing is as Courtney, I think, has already said it, I'm not hearing anyone argue for a search starting at this moment. It sounds to me like, so there's a consensus that we will want to be offering Superintendent Sesker some type of extension contract, a new contract. Whether or not that's a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract or an interim contract or a standard contract sound like things we are still thinking about. So, next week it would be great, I think, for us to create stability if we could take some votes on that. Is there a sense, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question, is there a sense that we might be ready next week? And we don't have to finish discussion at this moment, FYI. That we might be ready next week to take some action, or is that feeling like we need more time? I don't want to force us into an action and somehow regret that, but does that feel like next week is enough time for each of us to think about this? And maybe take
Mr.
action?
Chair, it all depends upon, classic lawyer quote, right? All depends. So the issues I see now are 1 year versus 2 year, and interim versus regular.
Yes, I would agree.
So that, so it would, what information I would receive or the board would receive, pros and cons to each, and how we're going to come about that. I think I've stated what I would like to see, just for flexibility within the district, and but, so a week, I'm not sure. I thought since we reached consensus here that we would extend that. I don't think, I think information, whatever, and if we don't come to that, maybe a vote in January would be just as appropriate as that, since we're doing a discussion or an extension anyway, but that's my 2 cents.
So if I'm hearing you right, John, your suggestion is with the consensus of the board on extending the contract, the timeline is maybe not quite so pressing as it you might have felt otherwise. Although I think your suggestion is perhaps we wait until January. You're not talking about months down the line. And I think what I'll ask is a question of what information, what thoughts are people feeling like they need to help them get to a place? I mean, I know not everyone is solid on where they want to be on this at this moment. And so I'm looking for ways in which we can be helpful, Superintendent Sesker can be helpful to help those who are trying to work through where they might stand on those questions.
Just to chime in, I don't want the board to feel comfortable if they think that they need to hire me. I want to make sure that it's something that you want to do, because it puts you and me both in a bad spot, because the expectations, they go both ways, you guys. And I evaluate you just like you evaluate me. And so I want it to be a mutual, respectful piece, because I don't think, not that you're not respecting it, you're doing a great job with that piece of it. But the whole idea of having a superintendent is help you lead through some of these pieces. And I don't want it to be an evaluative piece of a superintendent. If part of that is to create the strategic plan, move the district forward and things like that, then I'm all for it. I'm all in. That's what the superintendent does. But if you're not comfortable with that and you're having a hard time struggling whether you should have me here or not have me here, then I would say probably go to the search part. That's just being brutally honest from a superintendent's perspective. Because it'll be
No,
more
I can
difficult.
understand your sentiment. I mean,
Yeah.
you're basically saying, why would you want to stay another 2 years if you don't feel that we're supporting you? And so I appreciate your candor and being frank about that. So I do think that we do have to consider that in our approach, absolutely.
And I'm here to service the district. I'm not here to want a job. I can get a job. That's not a big deal. It's if you think that the service is something that you guys want, then I'd be more than happy to help out the district. So that's where I am at with my perspective on this whole thing.
Mr. Sesker, I certainly didn't get anybody's, I didn't get the vibe that anybody's saying that you're a time filler.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I didn't get that sentiment. Mr. Chair, my biggest, so I understand, and if you said, hey, send emailed questions about what you want answered type of thing, like we do oftentimes where we have questions, we table something. My biggest, give me the layman's term again for the difference really between the interim and the standard, and that's just the level of commitment in terms of the time of notice for one party to inform the other party that you're not wanted or that I'm leaving. Is that's all the interim is versus standard?
That's correct. With the standard contract, there's language within it that requires Todd or the board to give a certain number of months for notification that you'll be going a different route. With an interim, that notification to split ties can be a matter of a day, a matter of a few weeks, a very, very short notification.
So we just had a neighboring community, I believe, Kenyon Wanamingo, their superintendent, I believe, resigned to take the job at Hastings.
Correct.
And I believe he was on a standard contract?
Yes. Yeah, there's a mutually agreeable clause within there too. So both the board and the superintendent agree to it, then they have a separation agreement.
Because in that instance, if I remember reading correctly, or at least when it showed up in the newspaper, there was not a whole lot of days notice there. And when I say a whole lot of days, 30 to 45 days, of finding out that the CEO of your school district is leaving is not a lot of time, in my opinion. Now if we say, hey, we're gonna, somebody's gonna, resign or retire at the end of the year or something, that's a different story, and you get 6 months. But and maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe broke in the newspapers late, but that didn't seem like a whole lot of time to me, and so from a interim to a standard, I don't know the difference in that.
Yeah, normally, I mean, there's certainly those other situations, but normally either the superintendent lets the board know that they're retiring or leaving by November, and same thing with the board. If they consider to discontinue with the superintendent, if it's a new contract that's coming up, that also affects a lot of that too. Then they usually let the superintendent know by November or December.
Mr. Chair, could we clarify that situation you just talked about?
Yeah.
Was, I think it's Pesta or whatever,
Yeah.
Was he a interim in Kenyon, and I believe
I
he was
don't know
regular
for
in
sure.
Kenyon and now is going as an interim to Hastings, I believe.
I don't know
That's how
for
I
sure.
read that.
Yeah.
I think that's how I read it.
You're probably right, John, but I'm not sure.
MSBA, I think. So that's, I just wanted to
But
clarify.
in terms of that individual leaving, I don't, and once again, I could be wrong.
But he's leaving in June, I think.
No, I
No.
think he's leaving in January.
Joe,
Yeah.
January. Okay, then I'm wrong.
Don't
on
quote
that.
me on that, but I
Yeah.
think
I
that's, because
think
I know
that
that
was
the
my
current
understanding.
superintendent's done January 1st.
Yeah. So that's where I was going, I was trying to differentiate that, but it seemed like a very short amount of time that he was leaving.
What are interim contracts typically used for superintendents, or are they used in special considerations, or it's just up to the school district?
We're used all over, I mean, superintendents, it's all over the map for a lot of those different things. So it could range from 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, interim, permanent, it really is a range of contracts that go through the superintendents. And they're not bad contracts by any means.
Mr. Chair, I think there are members of the community that will have expected us to do a superintendent search, because in a regular work environment, that is the order, wherein one resigns and then is replaced through a search or interview process. I think, though, for the discussion that we've had here, we're at a critical time with our school board and our school district, particularly in light of declining enrollment at some of the levels in our school district. And I think from some conversations I've had with Mr. Susker, he has some plans that look very promising. And while we hope to get a highly qualified person coming in to follow him whenever that may be, I don't think we have the time to wait for a year or 2 years to put some plans in action. It's just my personal opinion that the public needs to know that this board is looking at how we can best provide for our students through the leadership that we need to carry forth in the next year or two. So I am cognizant that some people will not understand our discussion, and yet I think we have to make the decision we believe is right for the district.
I will just repeat similarly to what I said before, because I don't want anyone to think that I was the one who said anything about, I forget how Chad put it. I think the 2 year block of time is a really meaningful block of time that we can use Todd's experience intentionally to prepare for transition. And I would prefer to prepare intentionally for transition, like Carolyn said, in a critical time in this district, then be in a constant change pattern for the next 3 years, like Chad is alluding to. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Courtney.
And just to clarify, when you have a standard contract, there is a clause if the board and the superintendent mutually agree that a change is going to occur, that could be put into place.
Yeah, quite honestly, the superintendents don't have tenure, so I've seen boards separate in May with their superintendent, so it just depends on a lot of the different circumstances. I'm just saying that that's what the norm is. There are special circumstances that happen where the contract deadlines don't always follow. But I would say 90% of the time, superintendents and boards do follow that November, December date for notification.
Mr. Chair, maybe for me, the information coming out in emails or whatever would be pros and cons of 1 year versus 2, and then standard versus interim. That would solve it for me, I think.
That would be great. I would appreciate that as well.
But who would do the pros and
gonna
cons
say,
of 1 year versus 2? I don't think we should put Todd in that position to do that.
Well, you probably get an unbiased view, so.
I'm not trying.
So I get.
No, I think it's a good point, John. But my first question was the exact one, I'm not sure who you would look to generate that pros and cons list. And I ask that actually in sincerity. It's not clear to me, who might.
I was kind of looking at Ms. Yoakum over there, for one.
Trying to do that.
Welcome to HR, right?
Look at your colleagues over there.
But,
I mean, and I would offer that I would be happy to work with Nicole to help her also, because I think some of the pros and cons are ones that we've mentioned as opposed to simply
Right.
contract
Yes.
ones. So, you know, Chad worrying about stability in various ways, and so
Yep.
I'd be happy to do my best to summarize what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think that's it. Capturing notes about what we've already said about pros and cons would be great.
Yeah.
sorry, Nicole.
As well as some of the, I think the standard ones about differences in the contracts and things like that. I think that's Nicole's expertise, but some of the thoughts that we've been sharing here, I can help her and do my best to summarize what I'm hearing. It's important then, I think, for us to leave here tonight knowing whether or not we want to take action in December or next January. Are there strong, I know John has expressed that he's happy to wait until January, but I want to get a sense of the board if that sounds appropriate or if we'd rather move along in December.
I'd prefer to move along in December.
Other,
I would prefer December. We can certainly wait till January. I hope Mr. Sesker's getting the strong message here that we will be extending in some form or fashion, type of thing. And so I prefer the sooner the better to have absolute clarity, but I also respect John's wanting to get, make sure that we're getting all our questions answered. And if a week isn't enough time, that's fair as well. So it's, we're either talking about 7 days or 30 days or 35 days or something like that, so.
Well, and I think you're selecting a superintendent, so I think there is some justification waiting a little bit to find out. The only bad thing is that you're pushing the strategic plan away, back off a little bit too, probably. But it is a pretty big decision for the board too.
I think it's a place where I would prefer to err on the side of trying to be as comfortable as we can as a board. So I'm going to suggest we move to January to take that action. So that'll be my suggestion, unless there's an objection. I will do that. And with the intent that in January we'll make a decision about which contract that we would like to offer to Todd.
At the organizational meeting.
Remind me about January meetings. I've only been at 11 of them. So.
Yeah, so we have the organizational meeting. That's kind of primarily what we do. Then the 13th, we've scheduled a special meeting to do any sort of action items on there.
I think we can do that.
We can
With one
do it.
item, I think we can
If
add
you're
that.
okay putting it on the organizational
The
meeting.
organizational meeting is typically pretty short and straightforward.
I won't be
happy.
present at the meeting, but I certainly can share anything.
Ooh,
But
that-
that's okay.
That
I
actually
can
changes
share
my thought process. I would
I-
really rather not have a board member absent.
Because then you're looking at 5.
because then we're down
Yeah.
to 5.
Um,
I guess I wasn't aware of the time frame of appointing a new board member when that would occur. We don't know yet.
Oh, will we be deciding that in January as well?
I think that'll have to be in January.
That discussion's next week.
Right.
Yeah, we'll discuss it next
Timeline
week,
to be
but
discussed.
I think we can discuss next week and make decisions in January, but that board member would not be seated in January. Yvette's absence in January actually changes my feeling on it fairly strongly of wanting to do that with all board members present on such a decision. And now I'm favoring December. and I feel
I will be present for
particularly
January
sensitive
13th meeting. But, so,
I guess if we're gonna do a special meeting, it could be on the 13th as easily as the organizational meeting. Is there an objection to that?
So you're saying January 13th?
we're doing a special meeting anyway.
I think I'm gonna have to I just think we need to keep moving. And January 13th feels awfully far away to me.
I'm gonna put it on, we have it on an agenda for December. In light of some of those, I'm gonna suggest that we try to do this within the week. I will meet with Nicole ASAP this week to try and generate a report that we can include in the agenda as well as email out to everyone and go from there.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think just by the discussion the board has had, I think that will inform the community, and that was my intent, that we didn't rush into, look like we were rushing, so I think, I appreciate your intent of pushing it back to January, but if we get that information, I just want to assure the community and board members that we're doing it the right way, and we've committed to Todd, so that's one, and to guide us through this stuff, and that's what I'm going to do. So it's just a matter of ironing out the details now, so I appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bellingham. All right, any other questions or comments on this item before we move along on the agenda this evening?
I appreciate your conversations. I know it's hard having me here to have that, but I think it's important it's just weird that a superintendent, because all of our meetings have to be open. But I do appreciate your openness and honesty. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Don. All right then, that brings us to item number 11, other items of information. There's no student representative this evening. So items of information from school board members. I'll start with a quick comments then about the replacement for a school board member and how we want to do that. We'll have a discussion at our next meeting about that to formalize it, but I'll give you, so that nobody's sitting in the dark here, a little sense of what I do and don't know. The laws have changed on this recently, so it took us a little time just to make sure what the law was and how it applied to this. There is a deadline after which the board can make a decision about whether or not it would like to hold a special election or to simply appoint a new member. Prior to that deadline, there's a requirement that you hold a special election. That deadline was actually this past November's election for John's position. And thus we were after that timeline, and so the board can therefore choose to appoint or to do a special election. So one of the things we'll decide next week is whether or not which one of those two we'd like to do. I suspect I know where we're at that, but we'll save that for our discussion. In terms of appointment and how we want to do that, that is actually at the discretion of the board. There is no process by which we get to set our own process, so we'll want to decide on what that process might be. I'll have some suggestions, but I will be open to suggestions at next week's meeting to do that. I think it would be nice if at that meeting we could set up a process such that in January we could vote on some new members and have them seated in February, so we're not waiting on that process. Okay.
Never mind.
Sorry, it's not an agenda item, but I wanted just to give some sense of it. And we'll have a good discussion on that next time and make those decisions. But I think the key takeaways for you are, please think about what you might want from a process, since we are coming up with that on our own, if we want to do that. And then, of course, whether or not, I suspect, again, I know where we are, but whether or not we want to do a special election or do an appointment, and we'll talk about that next time. Other items of information from the board.
Well, I recently had the opportunity to visit the middle school and the ALC, and as you know, my children go to Roosevelt, so I had a great visit to the middle school. I saw a lot of wonderful things going on. I saw a lot of activity. I was there for passing period and was able to walk around and talk to some teachers and talk to some students, and I just really appreciated my visit, and I have given Mike that feedback, so that was really great. And then it was great to be at the ALC and see Ivana and be there again this year and meet some other teachers that I hadn't met last year. So just great things going on over there. And I know the Roosevelt team's really proud of their Discovery Day tradition, which was last Friday. And my children came back very happy, and the other children I know who go to Roosevelt came back very happy. So I just had a lot of nice experiences with the schools, and I'll work on getting to the other schools in the next couple months to stay the same. Yep.
Likewise, I was able to visit my assigned school of McKinley and met with Olivia Sage. It is so exciting to hear of how students have been placed throughout the district, particularly at our elementary buildings, Roosevelt and Jefferson, as a way to not only better utilize space, but to integrate those students into the school system earlier and help them transition, hopefully, into our school district in the future. I can't, again, say enough good things about Mrs. Sage. She's bright, enthusiastic, and seems quite ready to move forward. The other school that I'm assigned is Faribault Education Center, and I had the opportunity just recently to meet with Cassie Onstad, and it is amazing what is happening over there. And again, having one of our preschool programs there has been really invaluable. Just for anyone who might be interested, if you know of anyone that may be interested in helping with a little bit of volunteer time over at the FEC, they're looking for people who would just chat with students, help them develop their English skills, develop relationships, all in a very comfortable, supported kind of way. So I hope that in the new year we can help some of our friends in the community support that program.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to say, we all know last week we had an unfortunate situation at the high school, a threat. And I just want to say a big thank you to the district, the high school administration for building trust with students up there that was reported immediately. Thank you to our local law enforcement. And it's an unfortunate event that ended. I think our staff was well trained in how it ended and how they dealt with it. And so we're thankful nothing happened. So.
Mr. Superintendent, items to report.
Yeah, just a couple things. Healthy Impact, I don't know, you know where Healthy Impact is. They did a fundraiser for the school district, actually our angel fund for our food service, and they raised enough money to balance out 100 of our students' overdrawn balances, so that's terrific. So thank you very much, Healthy Impact. We'll be getting a report here for gifts and donations soon that you guys will see. A big thank you to John Curry. I just wanted to publicly thank him while we are out here in the open and in all of his leadership and his service for us. So thank you, John. I really appreciate it. C, our Schools for Equity in Education group is our lobbying group, goes up to the Capitol. You may have seen that we did end up with about $1.5 billion in the black. So there is a proposal to maybe look for another 1% to put on the formula. It's a long shot, but we're going to try. There's a couple other things that this board is certainly interested in the platform. One is special elections, to go back to the old way where we just appoint and then wait for the regular election. The other one is the renewal of operating levies. And if you already have an operating levy in place, there's a proposal on the platform, our platform, MSBA's, MASA, to have the school board renew that operating levy. Most of the operating levies that are renewals, where there's no tax impact, have almost always passed in the state. But what happens is that we spend $40,000 to $50,000 on special elections in order to have those things approved. So it really doesn't make any sense. It puts more ownership on you guys but we believe that that's a better way. Jeff Elstead and I and Senator Jasinski has done a great job listening to us, and we're hoping to try to move that along. And then last is the fall play. I went to see, I don't know if you saw it, but No Signs of Intelligent Life. If you didn't get to see it, you missed a good one. It was really great. Another one of Mr. Johnson's wonderful productions, and those kids just did an outstanding job with it. So great play. And I think there's a band concert tonight, but I don't know how close I'm going to be for that. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. We have some dates to remember. Monday, December 16th is a special school board meeting here at the district office. Monday, January 6th will be our organizational meeting here at the district office. Monday, January 13th, we will have our work session again here at the district office. With that, we will end our open meeting and we'll be going into closed session to discuss negotiations. So we'll take a couple-minute break while we wait to do that.
Do we need a motion to go into the chief?
I can never remember what we're supposed to do.
I think you did a great job tonight.
Yeah.
Normally, we make a motion to go into closed session.
So we'll make is there a motion to go into closed session?
So
at this
moved.
point? We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on this item? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We will adjourn for a couple minutes and then reopen in closed session.